Well, Kenya will head to its 2022 general elections to elect a new government this coming Tuesday. Despite the many challenges of insecurity, corruption and human rights violations faced by Kenya over the years, experts and organizations have seen these upcoming elections as pivotal in the initiation of a change. For the first time in years, the general elections have seen a large number of women vying for various government positions, albeit facing physical and social threats as well as victimisation. But what has been observed in the year leading up to the elections and currently on the ground with regards to human rights, free and fair elections and non-propagandist motives? Executive Director for Amnesty International in Kenya, Irungu Houghton, weighs in. Irungu, thank you so much for joining us this morning on the Weekend Report.
Thank you very much, Nkozo.
Well, I mean, Kenya has been touted as one of the healthiest democracies that we have on the African continent. So we know that a lot of eyes are going to be on these elections that come Tuesday, the 9th of August. But I'd like for you to take us through what's at stake with these polls.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, just to note that, there are 70 election observer missions that have arrived in Nairobi over the last couple of days. So, you're literally right that there are a lot of eyes on Kenya at the moment. So what's at stake really is a couple of things. One is that, in comparatively to the region, Kenya has had a very open representative democracy with regular elections. And in many cases, although there have been disturbances and, elections are probably the most violent episodes in Kenyan history, we have seen regular elections and, two-term presidencies without much contestation since the end of the one-party state in 1991. But really what's at stake at this time is we have a very closely fought race between Raila Odinga and William Ruto, both of whom have been in government for several years, both of whom are talking about, really have framed their election campaigns in this concept of freedom now, that freedom is coming. But you have really just 3 to 6% difference between the two of them, according to the opinion polls. The last one really is that, for many Kenyans, this is probably a critical moment in terms of the choice that they'll make. The two big political parties, there are 4 presidential candidates, but the two big political candidates are essentially have framed themselves ideologically, and there are clear choices that Kenyans have to make come Tuesday.
Now, you've written a piece, Irungu, around the misinformation that sort of was at play in the lead-up to these elections. Not quite to the level of the 2016 U.S. presidential elections, but I'd imagine some damage has certainly been incurred from the level of fake news that we saw in the lead-up to these polls. Talk to us about how this has potentially affected the integrity of these elections.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a number of, things that are very significant about this election. The first one, of course, is that this is a digital election. It is, the campaigns have been largely waged online. So we've got about 11 million Kenyans who have smartphones and about 7 million unique users on the main social media apps that you see across the world. I mean, it's sometimes said that we have a very diverse digital citizen, but actually, the majority of us are all on 4 or 5 apps, and that's TikTok, Facebook, WhatsApp, and Twitter in that order. So the other thing to note is that the digital information is highly visual, and what we've seen in the last 1 month is a 45% increase in malicious and hate-based, posting on these apps, particularly on TikTok. And much of it is fake news. I mean, much of it has been generated primarily to demonize opponents and their supporters, and to create the atmosphere, really, that, a false atmosphere for the campaigns. But, having said that, although the National Integration Commission last week declared Facebook to be a hotspot, if I can use that phrase. We've been talking about counties being hotspots, but Facebook was threatened with closure within 7 days. Now, although the government has said that they have no intention of doing that, the independent office perhaps erred in declaring a shutdown of Facebook during the elections. What is clear is that the social media giants have failed to regulate content. They have failed to stop the surging and trending of viral fake information. And secondly, that they have failed to regulate the use of advertising, which essentially boosts these posts beyond their authentic reach, to reach many, many more Kenyans. And, you know, 6 hours is a long time on social media. It can destroy candidates. Women have been particularly targeted in the sense that you've seen 740 attacks online and in our rallies. Verbal attacks and physical attacks, in the last 6 months. So 740 incidences of sexist, misogynistic comments against women.
I mean, you mentioned, the issue around the general regional stability. It's been quite topical leading up to these elections. I wonder if some of these inaccuracies that you've mentioned, some of the challenges that we've noted in terms of social media platforms and the role that they've played in propagating fake news, does that in any way shake up the role that Kenya has played as a beacon of stability around East Africa?
No, I mean, I think, so far, the campaigning period, the pre-election period has been relatively peaceful. I mean, we've lost 5 human beings, and those are 5 people too many. But the numbers are quite low compared to even compared to previous elections, and they're definitely very low compared to the elections in places like Uganda, Tanzania, and of course Ethiopia didn't even get to hold elections in the entire country. So we still remain essentially quite ahead of the pack in that sense. But I think the important thing for most Kenyans is that the quality of our democracy is not based on some comparative analysis. It's based on the constitutional threshold that we set in Article 81. And the article is very clear. That all people who are eligible must vote, and all votes must be counted. And we're yet to see if that happens on Tuesday. But the other part of that article essentially is that it has to happen in an environment that is free of intimidation, it's free of violence, and it's free of bribery. And we have seen, in some cases, very low cases of violence. And just to give an example, in 2017, there was a lot of concerns around the conduct of the police. But what we've seen in these elections so far, and we hope that this will be the case post-election, is that there is no single fatality that can be attributed to the National Police Service. In many cases, they have de-escalated situations. There has been training of 1,100 police commanders, and it's probably going to be the highest deployment of police officers in the history of Kenya, with 150,000 police officers deployed across the 40,000 polling stations. Okay,
so we've had a peaceful run-up to these elections, and I think many are grateful for that. We have 22.1 million registered voters expected to take place in the polls come Tuesday. However, concerns, Irungu, have already been raised around voter apathy, particularly amongst the youth ages between 18 and 35. Talk to us about that. What's happening in that demographic? Why are they so disillusioned with this particular election?
I think the disillusionment probably started a couple of years ago. I mean, when the Electoral Commission started voter registration, we saw a low uptake among young people, and therefore, 60% of the people who can go to the polls on Tuesday will be over the age of 35, and that, for a country in which 75% of the population is under 35, is a matter of concern. It is going to be, I won't say an old person's election, but it definitely will not capture a lot of the first-time voters that could have voted. And I think the solution is probably at 3 levels. The first is that for many young people, they don't see the connection between an election's good governance. So there has been very little voter education that has happened in the last 5 years or so. The second thing is that for many young Kenyan people, they are disconnected from public affairs. They're disconnected from public participation, although it's required under our constitution. And we're really reaping, sadly, the benefits of a poorly educated electorate in the first instance. The second one is that people have collapsed, the lack of inspirational leaders for many with the election itself. And the argument has been that, I can't see anybody to vote. I don't think I will run myself. and therefore you have, very few young people interested in this election. But just to mention that there are a lot of young people who are running in the election. We have about 16,000 candidates on the ballot paper on Tuesday, and only about 1,500 of them will be successful. So we probably will see something like 14,000 upwards, people not get in. And I'm just hoping that of the 1,500, many of them will be young.
Well, Irungu, thank you so much for coming on to today's program and sharing your insights with us. We will, of course, continue to cast our eyes toward those elections that come Tuesday.